In this video, we're going to talk about how to analyze a text using close reading. The acronym MIST is a great way to help you get in the habit of going beyond kind of a surface plot reading, but close reading tells us what we do with that information. Remember, the goal is not to be someone who can skim a text and get the basic gist of what it says. The goal is to be someone who can really analyze a text or any kind of data set, whether that's a crime scene or whether that's a patient's vital statistics, on its own terms. Identify patterns and clues, determine what those patterns and clues mean to create a theory about it, and then eventually be able to support that theory cohesively with evidence from the data set. You'll do that in any field that you go into, and learning how to do close reading is fantastic practice for it. For a lot of students, it's a bit more intensive than they're used to reading, but it is a skill that almost anyone can learn. And again, it's a skill that'll come in handy in most job fields, as well as just increasing your enjoyment when you're watching for fun, when you're reading for fun. You'll be able to see new levels in most texts or films or TV shows that you were missing before. For our purposes, I'm going to talk about all movies, books, TV shows, anything that we interact with or consume in that way as a text. Now, when we read shallowly and we skim the text just for a basic story, we're focusing on the what, okay, and that's summary. What basically happened, the main points only. That's summary. This is what you write in a book report or the kind of write-up that you do to prove that you read something. It's a good place to start to make sure that you understand what you just read, but that's all it is. It's a jumping off point. The only time you stop here is if you're reading for entertainment. And even then, you're missing out on a lot. How many times have you been talking about a movie with one of your friends and they mention some point that you completely missed because you weren't paying enough attention? Same basic idea. What we want to do is called close reading. Close reading focuses on the details. It looks at the literary elements like setting, character, symbolism, tone, and plenty of others, and sees how they work within the story. So if you're looking for the MIST acronym while you read, you're getting in the habit of finding them. Close reading tells you what to do with them, how to interpret them. So in other words, summary is watching a car drive down the street. Close reading is opening the hood and seeing how the car works. And in some ways, it is a bit more scientific than students often expect. So close reading is careful. It's a detailed examination of your text. And it's very good practice in the art of gathering evidence and performing an examination of that evidence. So it has the same potential biases and pitfalls of science, such as confirmation bias. It will also teach students how to find the structure and order from apparent chaos, which is an excellent skill that will transfer into many, many fields. The last step is analysis, and this is usually where your formal essays will come in. So summary focuses on the what, close reading focuses on the how, analysis is going to focus on the why. So what, how, and why? These are your three questions. You're really not finished until you've asked all three. Why does the author make the choices that they make? Summary and close reading are both steps on the way to the why, but analysis is overall a few steps further down in terms of complexity and depth of thought. And so a lot of times students, they think that they're not good at this process because they've just stopped too soon. Even if they're good at the how, a lot of times they don't quite get all the way to the why. Sometimes they stop at close reading. Sometimes they stop back at summary. And this understandably leads to a lot of frustration for students. The student is thinking, I don't understand what I've done wrong here. And it's not that the student has done anything wrong. It's just that they didn't quite go as far as they were supposed to. Kind of like they were running a race and they stopped halfway through because they weren't sure where the finish line was. So let's talk about what you're actually being asked to do when you're asked to analyze a text. And there are different kinds of analysis to make it even just a little bit more confusing or fun, depending on if you're a sadist or like English. So the different ways to approach a text are called schools of critical analysis or critical theory. You can look at them from different directions. So you can look at a text rhetorically to see how its structure works. And this is called structural analysis. You can study the way gender or sexuality or politics or race functions within a text. You can look at the psychology of characters or the way that the text interacts with the society in which it's created. The school that emphasizes close reading is called New Criticism, and it became really popular in the middle of the 20th century. And students are often really intimidated by this kind of work. Analysis is something a lot of students weren't asked to do before, especially if students came up in the era of standardized testing. A lot of times students are being used to the kind of work that gives them a checklist and then scores them on how proficiently they were able to perform the tasks listed on that checklist. Can you memorize the correct answer and then regurgitate it on a standardized test? And literary analysis is very different from that kind of work. You're being asked to come up with your own answer. You're being asked to demonstrate how well you can connect the dots to come up with a new theory. And that can be very intimidating when you've never been asked to do that before. But it's a very valuable skill. If all anybody needs is a machine to perform the same task the same way, they don't need a human being to do that. They need a machine. If they need something that can come up with a new approach or who can look at a problem in a new way, that's what literary analysis primes our brain to do. You've probably also heard that there are no wrong answers. And that's also not true. There are multiple right answers, but there are also definitely wrong answers. And you're only entitled to what you can prove with evidence. And you might have to battle, as it were, with a competing theory. So you have to be able to provide better evidence to support your theory, to say that it's more correct than their theory. You can't just pick an idea or theory and work backwards to make it fit the text, although a lot of people try. That's very common in this day and age, especially in our political climate today, where people have an idea, they think this is what I believe, you can't tell me I'm wrong, and I'm going to cherry pick my evidence to make it fit. That's not how it works in literary analysis. You have to start with the data. You have to start with the evidence. You have to start with the text. And it's also important to note that when we say start by the text, we don't mean summarize. Again, this isn't summary. This is analysis. Summaries aren't particularly helpful here. You should assume that your reader has already also read the primary text. They want to read your interpretation or your explanation of how it works. Your writing should add something new to the body of information or discussion of the text, and it should be supported with data, with evidence from the primary text or with research. Whereas close reading will stretch and sharpen your skills of observation and help you understand how things work together, rhetorical analysis will stretch and sharpen your skills of deduction. And remember, deduction is about inference, okay? You take the how it works that you observed in close reading and you interpret what that means and why it's important. What connections can you make between the details in the text or between the text and other texts or any other relevant information? This is also where research is going to come in. So how is Thanos like Moby Dick, for example, would be an excellent question for a research paper. Does Harry Potter count as a Jesus figure? Remember, your analysis is only as good as the data you gather and how well you understand it. Not all opinions are good. There are multiple right answers, but there are also wrong answers. If you misunderstood the text or you misunderstood the data you're trying to use to support your argument, then your opinion of its importance is pretty irrelevant. So the close reading skills are very important to the analysis level. It all builds. Unfortunately, the basic idea here is that it is hard. This is a hard skill for students to learn because I can't give you a step-by-step checklist and say if you do steps 1 through 10, you've mastered analysis. This is something you have to learn through practice and through looking at examples. It is a really valuable skill to learn though, and it's very worthwhile. You should commit to learning how to do it because it is so worth it. And this skill will carry through into so many areas of your life.